It's a gin back at the clubhouse. This is good.
At least it's not
Walker Cote.
live stream.
Yeah, we're going to reseal.
Okay, well, that's got to be a $10 fine, I'm sure.
Gin in the clubhouse.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Infrastructure Committee. Welcome to everybody in the chamber and also to those of you who are watching on live stream. We have two apologies from Councillor Arnold and Councillor Pottinger. I don't think there are any other absentees. I can see.
Seconded.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have no Zoom attendees today and we have no one on public forum. We have one minor late item, which is the activities report. Will someone move that we, thank you, Evelyn, seconded by Barry. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. That takes us through to the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee meeting held on the 5th of March.
I'll move those, Mr. Chair.
Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. The next paper is the subsidised, if I can find it, sorry. So, and Doug, you're going to present this one.
Mr. Chairman, you'll be aware that the subsidy for public transport for age-related fares is being removed by the 1st of May this year. Council has the option to continue with that level of subsidy for fares, particularly for under 13s, which are free at the moment, and the over 13 to 25 year age group. The initial report I put together had a costing of around $95,000 to continue with those subsidies. However, I have worked through a range of different options that we can discuss.
Okay. Can you actually, Doug, just tell us, since you've mentioned the 95,000, what the split is between the two that I mentioned in the paper, so under 12 and 13 to 25?
The majority are under 18, high school and primary. Yeah, so the between 18 and 25 is a very low number in comparison.
Well, the split that's shown here is 12 years old and under free, and 13 to 25 half fares. So my question is whether it's what the split is between those two in terms of cost.
I don't have that at hand, so
okay.
I can certainly get it for you.
Okay. So do you want to take questions, or are you?
If I might, I could go through the options that I've put together in terms of just this one option. There's 2 or 3 other options we can discuss.
Okay.
Okay. So the initial option we have is to retain the subsidy, and that is a $95,000 cost. So that basically, as we have it now, continuing on into the future. There are other options that we can have. When I looked at this and I talked to colleagues around the country, so the options were that they were all generally going to keep some but not all, some were keeping all, so it was quite a mixed bag. I think that retaining free fares for 12 and under, or 12 and under would be a good option. I think there's a downside to leaving those ones out, and the cost for that would be $59,000, so that would be combined with retaining half price fares for the under 18s. So between some 13 and under free, over that to 18 would be half price. So that's about a $59,000 costing. If we did free fares for all passengers under 18 and return adult fares to full price, the cost is around $106,000. If we did free fares for all passengers under 18 and retained half price fares for over 18s, it will be $141,000. So these escalate as they go. So currently adults are paying half price. If we retain that, there is a cost involved in it. So we have these options available to us.
Just to clarify, if we retain neither, am I right in thinking, in other words, if we do not step into the shoes of government because government has been subsidising up to this point, the option is that we have ratepayers subsidised rather than taxpayers. If we were not to do that, does it take exactly where we were before COVID?
Yes, it does. Yeah, the fares will return to those pre-COVID levels.
So when, at the beginning of COVID, government introduced, as we moved through COVID, government introduced this subsidy system with the intention it would be removed presumably at the end of COVID, and it now has been.
It was actually extended a number of times, yeah. And then when the previous government was in, they extended and put a more permanence to it. The current government has taken that away.
Yeah. Okay, so questions we have. Barry? Oh, what was it? Oh, it's Darren, sorry.
I can understand.
Puzzled for a second there, were you, Barry? Thank you, Chair. Gosh, it's a tough one in that, you know, we really want to keep a lid on our expenses, whilst at the same time being aware of the increasing household expenses, and particularly for parents with young children, trying to encourage them to use the public transport system to bring them into town. And also, I recall the sense of independence that many teenagers get by not relying on their parents for transport to and from. And from the options that Doug presented, I tend to lean towards the half price ones for those 12 to 18 and free for under 18, but I'm also acutely aware that that's a $56,000 cost that comes at. The upside of that is it does show people the benefit of using public transport, and it's a really strange progression that when people are out of town, they're happy to use it, but for some reason they find it a challenge when in Invercargill. It's the same when paying for parking. You know, they'll complain about the price of it, and when they go somewhere else, they'll pay a small fortune. I'm really keen to see young people encouraged towards using public transport and support the option of still free under 12s and half price 12 to 18. But I do so understanding the financial burden that comes from adding that 56,000. I guess on the other side, we have to counterbalance it with what the overall passenger transport numbers would drop to if there weren't any form of subsidy, and I think that again will produce its own issues.
Okay, thanks. We have Peter.
Yeah, thank you. At the other end of the scale, what subsidies do the Super Gold Card holders, the pensioners, get?
Super Gold card holders are unaffected by these changes. So they currently get half price.
Right.
They already get a half price fare.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
I would like, I know it's cost and I'm not sure where it will come from, but I'd like to advocate for up to 18-year-olds to travel free. As an educator, we're trying to keep our kids in school and trying to, particularly those 14, 15-year-olds who think of any excuse. If we can use the buses unpaid for those people who are struggling, then perhaps that's what we should be thinking about. I would advocate for free buses up to 18 and half price to 25 and half price for other citizens.
The cost of that, Doug, am I right? Was that your 141,000 option?
106.
It's 141.
41.
Yeah.
141.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Leslie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We know that we are struggling with the level of people using our public transport, and we want to try and do something about that issue. On that basis alone, I'm very much attracted to the keeping the fares free for the under 12-year-olds and half price for the under 18, the 13 to 18 age group. I think we just have to be serious about the fact we cannot sustain another drop in the usage of our public transport. this is the age group we want to get into the habit of actually using public transport and seeing it as a viable option. Why wouldn't we encourage them in this age group to continue to use our public transport? We certainly don't want to risk
Okay, Grant.
being around the table
Sorry,
discussing
Liz, I
another
thought you
drop
finished. Thank you.
in patronage.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Doug, can you take me through your numbers in a bit more detail? How we arrive at the $95,000, or what assumptions are we making about users?
That has the assumption we have to make is that patronage would be stable at that point.
What's that? Sorry.
Patronage would be stable, so with the numbers we have historically would be.
So how many under or 5 to 12-year-olds are currently using the system, and how many teenagers are currently using the system?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry.
Do we know those numbers?
We know those numbers. Yes, that's where those numbers have come from.
So if I do some simple math here, I say $95,000 divided by the average fare $2.20, there's 43,000 users. Would that number be approximately right?
That's the subsidy. The 95,000 is the subsidy, is the top up. So
Well, but it's a subsidised fare.
yeah,
right?
it's
So
a pro
still
rata fare.
doesn't
Yeah.
change the numbers. It's
Yeah.
just what subsidy they get.
Yeah, that would be
So
annual.
would that be right? So it's
Annual cost, yes.
So it's 43,000 young people using our buses.
It's 43,000 trips.
Trips. Well, that's a
Twice a
person
day.
using it, isn't it?
That is, but they could be using it twice a day. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Grant.
I think we need a few more numbers. My sense on it is that, it's an important function. It's interesting today. I've observed people, about 5 or 6 people waiting at bus stops. None of them in this category, but it was interesting to see, that people are using the system. So we've just got to find the balance around who pays, I suppose.
Ria. And then Nobby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug, I know that you have mentioned previously at the table that you have a indicative idea of modernising our public transport system in the future, and that you're working on that concurrently. So when I'm looking at the proposed subsidy to do or to not of option 2A and there, are the costs to those trips, are they being built into that strategy for the future? Or is that changing quite considerably given that the government's reduced the funding?
Through the chair, the funding is a concurrent matter with the model that we would try and use. So we're still working through that at the moment. We're not ready yet. We're also procuring the new system, so we're working through sort of concurrent workflows with those. The funding itself is gone.
Yep.
There's nothing we can do about that. The costings to council have been accounted for that. So whichever model we choose, and it could well be a smaller but more efficient network, it could be a larger network, depending on what the business case will come up with when we develop something. So I would suggest those numbers are pretty good for now for what we know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thank you for clarifying that.
Nobby.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like Grant. I can't make some of these figures to work out. So the subsidy is 95,000 from government, but you said if we retain the current status quo, it would cost us 141. So does that mean that we're already subsidising over and above the subsidy we get from government?
No, because the option for 141,000 is free travel for all under 18, which we don't currently have. We only have free travel for under 13s. So it's taken care of, for want of a better word, the high school age.
Yep.
Just,
Okay.
which is significant.
And again, you'll have the figures, but we don't have them today.
No.
But anecdotally, I mean, if I look at the buses and I keep an eye on the buses because I'm quite interested, as Grant said, $2 a head and 43,000 trips. I don't see 800 teenagers on our city buses every week. It just doesn't seem to be there. I can't remember the last time I actually saw a teenager or younger person on the bus. And maybe I'm not looking right, but it would be helpful to know, I think, because we could be pouring a whole lot of money in, as Leslie, I empathise with what Leslie was saying, but pouring a lot of money in, but we're actually not getting a lot of benefit for a very small group. So
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to have some more data on the patronage before we made a decision on what we want to subsidise. Thank you, Chair.
So pretty much everybody wants to speak, but Erin, you had a number that we're going to quote to.
I was just advising, I can't provide you the breakdown of the different classifications. Doug will need to bring that back. But in terms of total passenger trips on our network per annum, they're approximately 140,000 total passenger trips per annum.
But that won't be the two groups.
No, that's what I said. We need to come back with the breakdown of the various different age groups, but just for context, our total numbers are approximately 140.
Which would mean, I guess, Erin, that about 40% of what's on the buses, if using Grant's analogy, which is 95,000 divided by $2 a head, about 40% of the patronage on the bus is teenagers. And that doesn't seem to be my observation. But anyway, it would be helpful to know.
Okay, we'll keep taking questions. So Trish, then Panya, then Evelyn.
Thank you again. We have to also consider the people we've brought into Invercargill, the refugees, former refugees, who tend to be on the outside of the city, and they're only transporters by bus, and they use it frequently. And perhaps, Samir, I could take you for a ride in the morning and you'd see a few people on the bus. Is there any way that we could do this as part of a review? Like do it and then review it and say, like, just do it for a short time? Just a consideration.
Well, I mean, you could obviously, say that we would continue with the existing system for a period of 6 months to allow, some other data to be collected to, inform some other. I mean, we could obviously do that. Anyway, we'll keep going. Panya?
I was really in support of what Trish said around having it free up to 16 years to 18. But I'm more so in the thinking around larger families, large whānau groups, that can't afford travel to places, especially if they're into sports and things like that. And they put, when you've got, I had 3 children all playing different sports at one time, and I found that really difficult and challenging. And I come from Bluff, so people residing in Invercargill, you could jump on a bus and go in whichever direction.
Not to Sandy Point.
Not to Bluff either. So,
Yeah.
but I like the education side of it. If we can get them into the habit of using public transport, then that's the way the future's moving.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn?
So as a regular user of Invercargill City bus service, I came in on the bus today and I can report to the table that there were 2 people under the age of 18 and there were 4 people of my level of maturity or approximately over 18. Some of the heavily subsidised people, because between 9 and 3 it's the Super Gold Card time. But I think that we underestimate how people get on and off the bus. So what you see at a given point in time is not actually reflective of the whole usage of that particular service so like Trish, I'm quite familiar with travelling on a bus where there might be 5 or 6 people from a refugee family who are living on the outskirts of one of our suburbs, and cannot be stated enough that this is their independence, this is their ability to spend money in the inner city, which we also want to support and encourage. Now, many people will take it to their local supermarket and they get off at Martin Street or at Windsor Street or whatever, but equally people are going in and shopping in the inner city, and this is something that we want to encourage. How we do that, but also the pattern that you set between 5 and 18 is the pattern that people follow later on in their life, in my experience. That's why I catch the buses, because that is the pattern that was established for us when we were children. All in all, I think it's also about how we encourage alternative use of resource in the city. Bus service takes some pressure off our roads. We've been talking about that recently. we need to look at all the things that we can do. I recognise there's a cost. We've got to weigh that up. I quite like the idea of reviewing in 6 months to see whether the statistics and demographics change for the better or for the worse, because that should inform what the next decision of the table is. But I thank you for the opportunity to have a say.
Okay, well, Grant, I think you were next in.
Yeah, just I like the idea of a trial, and just a little bit to Leslie's point around, I think this is actually an opportunity for us to sort of understand the importance of our public transport in the city to this age group. We're not talking about other factions of the community within this paper, but equally they are as important. So I think we just need to be more data focused around a trial to understand, who is using it and how they're using it, and then it feeds into your wider strategy, Doug, around our public transport review. So I think if we're going to make an investment, as long as we are getting some really good informed decision data out of it, I'm supportive of that.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Yeah, through you, Chair, I just, to echo what Grant said, just probably wanted a bit more information around users and just maybe some more options. I know it's niggler for you, Doug, but I would have, in reading this, leaned towards, or would have wanted to see 12 years old and under free, and then 13 to 18 half year, rather than the 25, just for
Okay.
a couple more options.
Okay, so I'm going to take Ria and Barry, then we'll call a halt at that point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug, do we not really have that data collected that the members are referring to in terms of having a 3 to 6 month review of trips and age groups?
We have that data now, yes.
So what you've indicated to us is that you have it but not available for today. So if we're thinking about reviewing this or looking at our public transport, one of the things that we do want to encourage is future users in the new proposed transport use. If public has said, look, we're actually facing the fact that the subsidies have been cut, public will actually get out and use the buses more, to promote it. So I think there's a positive spin here that we could make happen, not focus on the what could be taken away, but what we can do in the meantime till we go into a new public transport system, which is better for our community. Fingers crossed.
Barry.
Yeah, I support a bit more research on this, especially with the numbers. I'm on a main bus route, and I just don't see those numbers go past my window. And they go right past my lounge. But I think it's a good idea for us to have the 12 to under free and the 13 to 18, but I'm not quite sure right up to 25. I'd like to see a little bit more clear of the numbers of these people and the ages of them.
So, if I can comment, I'm going to pour a little bit of cold water. I mean, I think everybody in the room so far has spoken in favour of continuing with something in some way. Different people have got different age ranges in mind and so forth, and therefore I think we'll end up sending it back, to get some options. But just to pour a little bit of cold water, as government decides that the country cannot afford to support things anymore and withdraws those services from the taxpayer, if we step into that gap and fill it with ratepayer money, then two things happen. The first thing is that there are only half as many ratepayers as there are taxpayers, so the ratepayer pays twice as much. And secondly, rates are a flat tax. So the old lady living in a 3-bedroom house who's a pensioner pays exactly the same rates as if an equivalent house has got 2 professionals working in it. So rates is a flat tax, whereas income tax is progressive. So when we transfer this or anything else that government might withdraw from the taxpayer to the ratepayer, we've got to be thinking about the impact it's going to have on, because it's not free money, obviously, the impact it's going to have on the pensioner living in the 3-bedroom house can't afford to move out of it. She or he is going to bear twice what the taxpayer bore. And not only that, but if she's on a pension, she's going to pay exactly the same amount as somebody who might be a professional person who would have paid far more through income tax. So I just put a note of caution into it, because this might be the first of a number of things that we see coming through where the government have decided that, as a country, we can no longer afford to do this. If every time they do that, we kind of step up, essentially frustrating the will of Parliament, if we step up and say, well, we're going to do it locally through rates, then all we're doing is just keeping pushing the rates burden north. So having said that, Nobby, I will give you another opportunity, then we'll...
Just one quick question through you, Chair. I just wondered what the prices were for those two age groups before COVID. So, did we have any subsidy on the tickets before then? So were the under 12-year-olds free, and the other group, were they 50%, or do we have none at all?
Through the
That's
chair,
one of the questions are, it's not as though we're taking away the subsidy. Government's taken away the subsidy, as you quite rightly say, Chair. So we could be just going back to what we had before. And what would the impact of doing that be against what we want to have for our community? Can you help me with what was there before COVID?
Yep, through the chair. If we went back to pre-COVID regime with fares and so on, there's basically there's a zero impact, because that existing subsidy that we get would match that. So anything on top of that, which is what we're talking about, the half price fares and the age group fares, that was additional subsidy on top of our normal funding rate. So we would go back to the normal funding rate.
So
if we go, sorry,
so prior to COVID, that there were still free tickets for under 12-year-olds and 50% for under 25s.
No, there was no under 25 fare at all.
So prior to COVID, those two groups of people, as they get onto a bus, would be paying something.
Yeah, a flat fare. If I think in Invercargill it was $2.20.
$2.20 for B card and $3 for cash.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Can I just ask a question around that then, and then I'll take you, Leslie? Have we inflated the basic fare RO in the last 3 years?
We haven't, through the chair. We haven't done it in my time. I don't believe that has moved for some time since pre-COVID. So those fares are at the same level.
If we incremented them, so 3 years, whatever it is, and it's probably 10% or something like that, I would think. If we incremented the basic fare by 10%, would it pay for the two special categories we're talking about? I don't expect you to have that math in your head, but I think it's one of the questions that you might come back with when.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm an ex-maths teacher. I was doing the sums. It would be close. I think something to note as well is that fare regimes and fare box recoveries are being worked on at government level at the moment, policy-wise. The expectation is that, for want of a better word, user pays will make up the funding shortfall.
So would we be free to make that change, or are you saying that that's driven by central government? If we decided to move normal fares by 10%, let's just suppose, to pay for the subsidised fares, would we be able to do that, or is the $2.20 and $3 mandated by government?
No, it's not mandated by government. Right. The current draft policy, which I'm working through, will give council the freedom to do that, which they hold now. You can set your own fares. The expectation from government with this draft policy will be that more of the user will pay as opposed to central government, and user pays would also probably apply to any cross subsidy that council gives. So it's still being worked through. It's a very opaque sort of situation, but they are developing that policy right now.
Erin, you were looking to say something.
That was okay. Doug's now covered it.
Look, I think the general mood is to continue something in some form, but we may be that each of us have got preference for a particular age range, or even the question I just put about whether it should be balanced by an increase in the normal fare. So I wonder if we could perhaps, I don't know quite how to do this, but I was going to suggest that we say that we retain the subsidised fare levels for passengers for 6 months to allow Doug to come back with a range of options for us, including a cost-neutral one, where it gets balanced by fare increases, and looking at maybe several age range type options. You've heard what various councillors have proposed. The age 18 seems to be quite interesting to people. I think everybody seems to be around that. Nobody seems to be too worried about 19 to 25s. So, would it be possible, I mean...
Chair, would you like us to bring that back as part of the long-term plan deliberations? That might...
Okay, that's a good idea. When have we got to make this decision by? So when does the government funding run out?
April.
End of April.
That's why I was going to suggest, Mr Chair, that we actually move a recommendation to retain the subsidised fares for a period of time that would allow Doug to give us the further information we need.
Okay, nominate a time.
Well, you've said 6 months, Mr Chair.
3 months.
Doug,
Okay.
would 3 months be a reasonable amount of time?
Do it in 3 days.
3 days would be far too short for the public.
Through the chair, it's just a matter of me adding those other figures in, doing a quick calculation and coming back to the next meeting. So if you wanted 1 month or 2 months.
Yeah, why don't we, I'm prepared to move a motion that we retain the subsidised fares as they stand, considering the administrative difficulties of changing them for a short time while we're still considering, that we retain the subsidised fares as they stand. So that's the 12 years and under as free and the 13 to 25 as half fares for a period of 2 months while our staff bring back the further information.
Yeah,
that we
3
require.
months sounds more practical to me, Leslie, to be honest.
3 months. Fine.
Why don't you say 3
3
months
months,
since it's you?
I second it.
Okay, any more discussion? So we're not just kicking this down the road. What we're saying is that we would like to see some options for us to consider. We'd also like to see a cost neutral option, you know, providing a subsidy for some people but balanced by a cost of living increase on the existing fares, and that you'll bring that back, Doug, in the next meeting, hopefully, and we can make a decision at that, and then, you know, 3 months just allows things to... am I right? Let me ask a question around that. So you got to know when somebody boards a bus what age they are. So if we were to change the half fare, just for argument's sake, from 25 to 16 maximum. So how do you know that? And is there administrative time required to make that adjustment?
We have through the chair, we have a number of conflicting things at the moment. One of our biggest challenges is that the national ticketing system is going online for Invercargill towards the end of the year. So we're one of the first cabs off the rank, so we're trying to coordinate all these changes to meet at the right point. Having said that, changing fares and fare types is not a challenging thing for us at the moment, because we're still sitting outside the NTS program. Once that kicks off, that'll all be transferred through. So I don't see it as an issue if council decides to put up full adult fares by, as you say, 10%, 20%, whatever it may be, and retain the other ones, or even make amendments to that. It's not an issue to change the fares. It's just a matter of timing.
It's more about, the question I had was more about recognising somebody's age. So you say at the moment between 13 and 25 people get half fares, so I presume there's a system that identifies whether somebody's between 13 and 25. Now if you arbitrarily change that to 16 or 18, let's just suppose, as a maximum, would that system be able to cope with that immediately, or would there be some changes had to be made to the system to allow them to identify who's in that new age range?
Through the chair, the system recognises when we register, for example, the B card system we have at the moment, the new system will have that as well. It has your date of birth on it. So it automatically changes that in terms of the fare you would pay. So you're registering at that age range.
So you're not worried, you're not concerned about that side of it?
Yeah.
Okay, Nobby, you wanted to say something?
Can I suggest the June, instead of 3 months, the June infrastructure meeting that allows any changes to impact before the end of the financial year? So that if we were to make some changes, it would the impact date could be 1st of July, which make it really tidy for bookkeeping purposes.
So it'd be 2 months.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep.
2 months rather than 3, which Leslie proposed in the first place.
Just a
so,
suggestion.
Would you move it, Leslie, with that comment again? And Trish, you seconded it. Do you want to second it on the basis it's the end of June? Yes.
Point of clarification.
Yeah.
There used to be student fares. Do we still have that?
Through the chair, no, because they're covered by the current subsidies. Previously, it was just a flat fare.
So if you are aged 13 to 25 and either in secondary school or post-compulsory education and training, you don't get a subsidy necessarily under the conversation that we have going forward.
Through the chair, you don't get a subsidy for being a student, you get a subsidy by age.
By age.
Yeah.
So if it was withdrawn, then they wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
The students wouldn't get it.
I think we need to think seriously about that part of the equation. People who are over the age of 16 and are in the paid workforce are in a different position than those who are either still attending school or in post-compulsory education and training. And is that a group that we are concerned about?
That's why we're asking.
That's why we're asking the questions. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I grew up in the age where the student ID gave you the discount, and I was thinking that was attached to the B card, and I discover it's not. So thank you.
Okay, we'll bear in mind that if we did have a system where it was balanced by a relatively small increase, it'd be 20 cents or something, a relatively small increase in the overall fare, then you'd be able to keep the age ranges as they are, and it would cover all students. So anyway, we do have a mover and a seconder. Yes, Alex.
I just wanted to make the point that a lot of the schools actually provide, bus services that aren't actually subsidised or part of our public transport system as well. So it's all very well and good that we may subsidise that portion at the moment, but there is a significant portion of students that wouldn't actually benefit from any subsidy that we provide.
No, it depends how far you are from the school, really, doesn't it? How far away you live. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So it takes us to the Regional Land Transport Mid-Term Review submission. And Doug, it's you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the last infrastructure meeting, you'll recall that I was asked to prepare a submission on behalf of Council, and that is attached to this very short report here. The focus has been obviously to highlight the good points, and the good points are that maintenance and rehabilitation funding is still there for us. That hasn't changed. And the GPS is enforcing that. I have strengthened it in terms of the Bluff Highway to align with our GPS submission, which went in last week. And that's about it. And obviously encourage them to consider alternate modes and retain something in that space for as long as we can.
So questions to Doug? There are no questions. We're asked to receive the report and to recommend to Council that Council endorses the submission to the mid-term review. Sorry, Grant, you do have a question.
The submission, has anyone proofread it?
It's still draft. It's in case there was any changes. Yes, I know.
Okay. Okay. So we'll take those two together. Receives the report and endorses the submission to Council. Will somebody move that? Thank you, Barry. Second by Darren. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, next we have the Kotahi NZTA Investment Audit Report. And it's you again, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of our regular audits from NZTA. They examine all aspects of our network, the condition of our network, how we respond to it, how we planned it, and how we're utilising the investment that NZTA makes in our network. So it's Very much from my reading of it and my staff's reading, we're quite pleased that it's a report that is more encouraging than the previous one. So we're making headway there, and we've recognised that where we do have more work to do, we've actually got plans in place for that already. So overall, I think we get a pass mark. It's not a high pass mark, but it's pretty good, but it's an improvement on the previous one. And so we'll just keep chipping away at that, maintaining our advantages and then making the improvements where we can. I think a lot of it, from what I've seen, is really that they've focused on a number of areas, and it's about pavement condition, because that leads to a safety issue as well, and making sure that we're on top of that. They did mention safety, and they did mention safety auditing. It is not something Invercargill City Council has done regularly, but I think safe systems audits is something that we need to plan for. We need to reflect on what we've done and how effective it was, and obviously reflect on what we're planning to do as well. So those are highlights. It's just indicative of the things they would like to see us do more intensively, I think, rather than better.
One of the things that I'll take questions in a minute, but one of the things that surprised me when I read it, Doug, I don't suppose it surprised me, but I noticed that the recommendations were, for example, that we have more raised platforms, the junctions, that we narrow the roads in some places to encourage people to go slower, and that it encouraged us to continue to look at our speed limits and to try to continue to reduce those. And I just wondered, as I read it, read the recommendations, whether the current government's direction, which is more about the economy and driving the economy, and therefore vehicles moving around without necessarily bumping up through raised platforms, whether that was likely to change. Now, I know this is only done every 7 years or so. 7 years, I think it's done, isn't it? But the recommendations, which didn't seem to me to really align with the current government's, latest guidance. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a fair observation. The change in focus for transport in New Zealand has changed quite remarkably in the last few months. This audit report was completed just prior to Christmas as a draft. We had opportunity to comment on it then. And of course, the GPS came out after that. So yeah, there is a bit of chasing there. The fundamentals of this audit report are solid. The safety part of it doesn't mean that we don't have to address safety as an issue. We just need to address it in a slightly different way. So we've got to be quite agile with this, given the funding that's at risk most of the time. So,
but rather than, I was going to say blindly following, that's not quite correct. Rather than following the recommendations in this report exactly, you would presumably have an overlay thinking about, the new government's guidance rather than, the old government's approach. I mean, I could hardly imagine, that we'd go around reducing the width of our streets just to make people go more slowly, which is what one of the recommendations that they make. And I'd find it very, very hard to imagine the current government supporting that sort of recommendation.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there is an element of surprise in some of that, given the direction we're taking. But as a former traffic engineer, that is a genuine method of slowing people down, and I've used it myself on many occasions. So it's again, it's a timing issue with the recommendations here, I believe. Yeah,
having somebody with a red flag walking in front of a vehicle is a good way of slowing them down too. But we're not going to go back to that either.
Unless you're that person.
So, Nobby.
Yeah, just one question on page 21 of board books, which is the expenditure that it refers to our per kilometre expenditure on the roads as being 15,000 plus a bit of change, and then it says this is below the average expenditure for the cities of 21,000, nearly 22,000. And I don't know how you match that up when you go down 2 paragraphs further down. It says there are some areas for improvement around pre-seal maintenance and aged asphalt servicing. I mean, you can't have a penny both ways. I mean, if you're underfunding, then there's got to be some consequences further down the line. I would have thought, give us 22,000 per kilometre, then we probably get that stuff done. So just a reflection of bit of a harsh report. And I think a lot of it, as you quite rightly said, is very subjective. It uses words like relatively healthy, whatever that means to a lay person, and slight concerns. And I don't know why they're just not bold, say actually your network's looking pretty good. Yeah. But is there any reason why we're below that average, or is that just something we take on the chin?
I'd like to think, through Mr. Chairman, I'd like to think that it's the quality of the spend rather than quantity. The audit report does confirm that we have a network that it's in good condition. We just have little windows of opportunity to make some further improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Doug, just a couple of clarifying things. What's a catch pit clearing?
Catch pit?
Yeah.
Like a sump.
Right, and then an AC milling mixed with aggregate.
AC milling, so it's asphalted concrete, so it's eroding surfacing, and when you mill it, you can use those pieces. Often it's used in unsealed roads.
Yeah.
It's a binding agent. You can put other elements into it to make it solid. So it's a recycling method to reuse material once you've taken it off the road for renewal.
And it's good to see acknowledgement of that strategy. So
Yeah,
well
it's a very wise thing to do.
Yeah.
Is it actually, have we actually used the word invent? Did we invent that? Or is it
Did we-
used elsewhere?
No, we didn't invent it, Mr. Chairman.
We didn't.
No.
We could charge the patent.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Actually, what I wrote down.
It's right. And the final question, just and it's probably to link with Patricia. During the audit, we had to wait on some data about smooth road or traffic flow or something like that. Is that what they're talking to here around the smooth travel exposure? Is that, or is it different?
No.
I'm going to defer to Doug on that one.
So smooth travel is an element of comfort. So it's a smooth travel and also delay in the network. So how much delay you've got. So.
And that was what we got sort of in the audit, wasn't it?
From memory, yeah. It was the same measure.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, Evelyn.
So unsurprisingly, Mr. Chair, through you to Doug, the issues about safety that they've highlighted, but particularly the comment that you made about safety systems review, that we haven't really done that. So what would that look like?
I don't know if you remember things called safety audits. They used to hold those for you put a new construction, and so you would pre-audit and post-audit. So what you think it's going to do and what it did do. So you used to go through these processes with the old Transit New Zealand, showing my age there. There's no different in terms of a safe systems approach to auditing those sort of things. We don't do it because we have the option not to. We can say we're not going to do a safe systems audit on this. We have that option. My view is that we should do some pilots on these things just to make sure we're still in line with good practice. That's really what the comment means. They've just acknowledged that we haven't done any in that period. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means that they're acknowledging that none have been done.
And the other thing is the highlighting vulnerable road users, and I guess we're not doing perhaps as well as we might. Have they identified particular target groups? For instance, we've had the Blind Foundation appear before us. Is that one of the target vulnerable user groups that they highlight, or is that different for Waka Kotahi than it is for ratepayers?
Through the chair, no, I think the disadvantaged groups are disadvantaged groups no matter who you are. They've certainly acknowledged that, again, it's a space in the safety area that there's work to be done, and we've taken that on board and we've acknowledged that. So I think in the future we would make that try and embed that into our thinking, make sure we don't miss it.
Thank you. Appreciate the answers.
Panya.
Just one quick one. I just recall when Councillor Potter mentioned and talked about the Amawi Road and the condition that road is in for various reasons. But I just noticed in this report, it just speaks of some minor issues were observed on the unsealed roads, but overall they were fit for purpose with adequate shape and drainage. I mean, that road continuously gets ripped up due to the trucks. So my question really is, I find that whole statement questionable.
Through the chair, I took that statement to mean that they acknowledge that some of the unsealed roads need some work, and we've acknowledged that within our responses as well. So I think one of the reasons that they brought up the AC milling reuse was maybe encourage us to do something there, and I'll certainly take it on board.
Alongside the Gun Pit Road in Bluff, which has never been tar sealed in any way or form and has been an ongoing problem.
I'm aware of Gun Pit Road, yeah.
So I think for me, the two things that really caught my eye, apart from the comments I made before, some improvement needed. 4 out of the 5 ratings are yellow rather than green, so clearly a bit of room for improvement, and it's the sort of thing that Panya's talking about. I mean, I don't think anybody sitting here would say that our roads are pristine. So but the other thing that I noticed was in the first paragraph of the executive summary, the comment, Invercargill City Council is performing well against their peer networks. So we are, not as good as we'd like to be, but we're maybe better than most, which is small comfort, but some comfort.
Mr. Chairman, I took it as comfort. I took comfort in it.
Okay, so we are asked to receive the report. Will somebody move that? Thank you, Evelyn. Seconded by Trish. Is there any other discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Takes us to the temporary road closure.
Happy to move the 3 recommendations, Chair.
Second.
Good to see they're using Esk Street.
So we have a move on the seconder. Ria, any other discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We have the very interestingly titled Acquisition of Land from His Majesty the King. So, are you going to talk to that as well, Doug? No?
Either.
I don't think so.
Well, unless somebody...
You've been released.
It's a really interesting one. I've always imagined it would say the Crown. This is the first time I've ever seen something that says His Majesty the King. So what's the difference between the Crown and...
Who's reigning at the time?
No, I know that, but normally just
Mr. Chair, the Crown doesn't exist as an entity. The entity is His Majesty the King, or in times that most of us have known for most of our lives, Her Majesty the Queen.
Okay.
The Crown is the descriptor that is used, that is both generic and gender neutral and covers all positions, whereas the person that this takes place with is the King.
Okay.
Good talk.
And if you look at the archaic wording of the actual document, that's pretty standard.
Of its time.
Okay, over to
Of
you.
air time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is in His Majesty the King's name because he's the legal owner of the land. So this is a very long, outstanding matter that we're tidying up. We've had some discussions with previously Housing New Zealand, now Kāinga in terms of just getting the actual ownership of the land that we're occupying. It's the access way off Miller Street into Turnbull Thompson where the Marist grounds are, and there's also a formed walkway between Miller Street and Tweed Street. It's just simply an administrative matter. There's no compensation payable to His Majesty or the Crown, if you refer, once we get it tidied up, it'll go into council name, and the reserve will get designated as recreation reserve, and the walkway will become roading.
Okay, thank you. Any questions to Heather? Yes, Leslie.
No, I was just going to say I'm happy to move 1, 2 and 3.
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, please.
Yep.
just want to know why. Why we're doing it. It's simply a matter of tidying it up. It was part of a housing subdivision that should have taken place at the time. But if we wanted to deal with the land in terms of making improvements to the road or the access way, we don't have the legal entity to do so. So
is it a cost to us?
There is no cost to us. We're not paying for it. The agreement that we've reached is that Kaingaora will meet all the subdivision costs. The only cost to us is actually designating the reserve status, because once we've got the land, that's our cost.
Okay. He's very generous, King. Any other discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you. Sorry.
Takes us through to the activities report, Anna.
Thank you, Chair. The key piece that I just draw attention to is the piece around cyanobacteria in the Ariti River. I'm sure you will have been waiting for an update in there to see that whilst we do have cyanobacteria or blue-green algae present in the Ariti River, we have done testing around whether or not that has released any toxins into the water supply. And what we have at this stage is testing that is showing no detectable levels either at the source water pre-treatment or at the water post-treatment before it starts its journey back to the city. So that's very good news for our supply. Admittedly, the risk was low even if there had have been some toxin present, given our multi-barrier treatment system that we have in place, but still preference for it not to be there at all. We will continue monitoring for as long as we have that presence of blue-green algae in the river, as well as we're working through, as this is the first time that we've had, we're aware of blue-green algae in the Ariti. We're also working through updating our water safety plans so we can make sure that we're more proactive in identifying that in future years, as we expect it may now become an occurrence that we see more often. Happy to take
So before we move on to other aspects of the activities report, are there any questions on the cyanobacteria? No? Okay, any other comments you want to make in the remainder of your report, Ellen?
No, happy to just take questions.
Okay, questions on the remainder of the report? Did I see your hand up, Leslie?
No.
Oh, sorry, Evelyn.
Yeah, no, just a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to Erin. Have we tidied up the advisory notices between ES and yourselves?
We have, in terms of making sure that we're receiving more proactive advice from Environment Southland. However, the other piece that we've put in place is now to make sure that we're looking at how we do our own monitoring of that, so that we don't have to be dependent on that advisory from them as well. So staff are receiving training around how to identify that and putting in place our own monitoring regime as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's excellent.
Ria?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Erin, I just wanted to go down to page 53, footpath renewals, and note the areas that they are being renewed. And I wondered about the issues on McMaster Street with the tree roots coming up through all the footpaths and the danger that poses to people of sight problems. Has that come up in detail, because it's quite significantly quite
It's
bad?
not one that I'm aware of, but the team may have a plan around it. I can come back with some advice on that one.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Grant?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Chair. Page 58. Note the comment there around the hold up with the D Street renewal, Waihopai, and it's tagged to the heritage approval piece. And you know, what cost does it come at to have you know, heritage approval for all these sorts of things? You know, think about the building in D Street that's being held up in terms of the one that got burnt out, and you know, the cost to our city of complying with some of these sorts of things. I appreciate what we've done in East Street and Don Street and some of the other really good stuff we've done, and the funds we have set aside with you know, with upgrading some buildings, but there seems to be an inordinate amount of money spent on, you know, something like that, 600,000, if that's what the blowout was, is that how much the cost of having the heritage approval was? Is that why it was over budget by 600,000?
So the full cost wasn't just simply around the heritage costs. So if I take you back, you'll recall that this was the project where we came across the box drain.
Yeah, I know which one it was.
So there was also some issues there which we've noted around contamination in the roadway as well that we've had to deal with. I can go back and check with the team, but I'd expect that the majority, more than half, would have been associated with the delay around working with heritage on that. We were several months around that. Partly it was just simply around the process that we have to comply with regardless. Partly it was also around changes from our global consent process that we previously had in place and us working through those changes with heritage. We also could have been quicker in how we did that as well, coming up to speed with those new rules. But it's definitely a significant cost for us when we do come across those unforeseen items when we are doing work.
So, secondary question, is there an option for us to apply for an exemption through the Minister who oversees the Heritage Fund around events or circumstances? And you take, for example, the building in D Street, can we not apply to the Minister for an exemption to heritage status on that building?
In terms of the building side of things, I'll defer to Jonathan on that one.
To the best of my knowledge, no. With a regulator, it would fall to the building owner to attempt something like that, but I don't think there's provision with the RMA for that.
So our city just has to put up with
So one of the things that we were working particularly on this project with was that balance between, obviously there's significant heritage interest when we find something like that, and they're very keen to be taking as much observation of that, as much photos as we uncover various different pieces, but trying to work with that balance of priorities of them also understanding the delays, the cost to the ratepayer associated with that, and try to make sure that we're getting the balance right with that. I would say I don't think we got that balance quite right on this job, and we need to continue to work on that.
Right. Because we're not a city that turns itself nose up at heritage. Look what we've done with the Civic Theatre, look what we've done down East Street and Don Street, and again I reference the fund that we've created to help building owners, do up the facades or put lipstick on them, as Darren would use. So, we're not saying we're going to walk away from some responsibility, but we need to find a better balance. And when it comes at a cost, what you've suggested is perhaps 300,000 in this thing, or the cost it has to associated businesses with the Don Street. Appreciate it's not ours, but it's in our city. I think we just need to weigh in a bit heavier on this and get a bit more pragmatic approach to how heritage steps into the realm of our buildings and those sorts of things, so we can just make better progress quicker and have a bit more sort of objectivity around it.
The bit, when it's a building, it's a bit harder to see through, but the box drain one did seem to be ludicrous almost, didn't it? And I can tell you in the UK, if you run the road, when they ran a road across Anglesey Island, and that was running straight across an area that was just full of graves and all sorts of things, all churches. The heritage people were not allowed to hold up the driving of the road any more than 2 days. They had 48 hours. Whatever was found, they had 48 hours to do it, and then they just kept on driving the road. And when I say driving, I mean the sense of making the road, right? Now that might sound extraordinary, but the road builders made a comment to me at the time that if they had been given their head, the road would just never have been built. It would have been 100 years building the road. So I think definitely is room for a bit more common sense in these things, maybe than we see. That's not a building though. We're talking about box drain. Yeah.
I think the key piece would be, at the time, we did take some advice from Michael Morris from a legal perspective, and I think, unfortunately, the legislation doesn't give us a great deal of wiggle room. It is a question of whether we're compliant with the legislation or whether we are not compliant with the legislation.
Okay, we'll keep going. Alex, then Ria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to have a wee korero about Queen's Drive, Herbert and Gala, the resurfacing that's just taken place. A couple of years ago, we had that resurfaced as well, that same area, and we had encountered that horrible crash once that road had just been resurfaced not too long ago. And it was heading into autumn. There's quite a lot of debris on the road. Can we be assured that that's not going to happen again with that resurfacing, that road resurfacing? It's that same area between Herbert and Gala.
I wasn't sure of that though.
So, through yourself, the chair, this is part of the regular reseals program for that road, and it's now been asphalted moving forward. In terms of we've done quality assurance checks down that section of road, which we're very comfortable around. I'd refer back to obviously the unfortunate accident that we had, where we've worked through with the police around our knowledge of the conditions and worked proactively with them. At this stage, we're still not aware of the road surface as having been a major contributing factor to that event.
Okay, Ria.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on the fact that we've underspent in the speed control signs for some schools, or Tisbury. Do we know what those other schools identified that may need some additional safety work are? Do we know who they are?
The team will know that as they're just working through them at the moment, but I don't have those names to hand. It's simply around the fact that we've been a little bit more efficient in our spend. Now we've gone, is there some opportunities that we can quickly work with some other schools proactively to agree to do some work? It'll somewhat come down to contractor availability and also how quickly the schools work through that process with us.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we are asked to receive the activities report. Oh, sorry, Nobby.
Just a couple of quick things. On page 5 of the report, it talks about waiting lists for our housing. It has a comment at the bottom that says the total waiting list has a minor increase but continues to remain reasonably static. Well, that's not what I read into it. The priority waiting list has gone from 58 to 75, so that's 30% by my calculation. That is not insignificant, and if that trend, which seems to be regular, going right across the spectrum there, continues for another 12 months at that rate, we would have 100 on the list.
Sorry, through yourself, the chair, the 58 was the figure in July last year, and then through to obviously to 75 at the moment. I think that refers though to the overall piece around. We obviously have had some increase in the last year, but if you have a look at the total figures down the bottom, that 76 was a bit of an anomaly figure. Generally, we're sitting between that sort of late 80s to early 90s. So we'll continue to look at that, but in terms of the total waiting list trend, we've not seen a significant change in the trend. There are a few blips there, but generally we are sitting in that high 80s.
Well, still an upward trend, I guess, and that's when you consider the work that you've been doing, Chair, and Leslie's been doing as well. That's an ongoing trend for us at elderly care. The other issue is I wasn't clear where we got to with Grant's question about the burnt out building. So given that we're live streaming today, it'd be helpful to know where we are actually going with that building. I mean, are we stuck with our hands tied behind our back? Is that the position? So could that building still be the same 5 years from now?
There is a degree of possibility unless it becomes a health hazard with infestation of rats or a public safety hazard with further dilapidation. That would be the next trigger that would allow council to take steps. In the meantime, we have to wait for the builder, for the owner, sorry.
Private owner.
Yeah, I do understand that, but I think the private
understand
owner,
it's frustrating, but these are not our rules. Really frustrating. On the good side, it's good to see that we're back to 2 lanes there, and that a new traffic management plan was worked out.
Yeah, I think it's a matter that's likely to be dealt with by the Wellbeing Committee. I would think dealt with. It's a matter that should be considered probably by the Wellbeing Committee, and I just wonder whether a paper to that committee looking at the would be.
And what lens have you got on there, Jet? So, if it became a health issue or a public safety issue,
no, but I'm
it's
just
a regulatory issue.
Yep.
because it's the Resource Management Act and the Health Act, the Heritage Act.
But
that comes under it. It's probably not something that Erin.
So there is already a request that came out of what I think was actually the council meeting for a paper to be developed jointly between infrastructure from the roading perspective and Jonathan's team from a building perspective to come back to the committee.
So we'll come back to this committee or
come
your committee?
Erin's.
Okay. So when will that be? Within
Not
the next
next
month?
week.
No.
So probably the
The
following month?
Yes.
Okay. That'd be good because I think, I mean, we'd all like to be informed just what the constraints are and so forth and what the possible pathways are, or if there are no pathways, you know, just confronting the fact that, you know, it might be sitting there for a while.
Through you, Chair, fair question. I know that during LTP consultation, that was one that came up. What are we going to do about it? And I had to explain to the person what the processes were and how we were constrained, which they accepted. But like with us, it's frustrating.
Okay. So we'll defer the question to the Wellbeing Committee who'll resolve it for us. Okay, Dan?
Well, give it a shot.
So I've been
Within
asked to
the
receive
limitations.
this paper. Will someone move that? Thank you, Panya. Seconded, Evelyn. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Which takes us to the end of the public papers. Will someone move that we move to public excluded?
Move
Thank
the
you,
reasons
Dan.
outlined.
Second, Leslie. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.